Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the My Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I want to go over a topic that around calorie tracking and where a lot of people go wrong with it. And if you're someone who is sick of tracking your food, or maybe you are tracking and you're not seeing results, what are some things that we can do here to maybe get you to the point to one, get more out of tracking and or eventually getting away from it altogether? I'm going to talk about some things that you can develop there and things that I work on inside my coaching program. Before I go into that though, I just want to go over my body recomp checklist. So if you're interested in learning more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, the 10 things you need, the two types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body comp, really the ins and outs of body recomp, that my checklist is for you. And the link to that is in the show notes. So make sure you go and check that out if you haven't yet. All right. So today's topic is going to be around, I want to frame it around, are you sick of tracking every last gram of food, or maybe it hasn't worked for you. So maybe you're someone who maybe it's worked for you in the past, but you feel like you need to do it in order to maintain your progress or to keep making progress, or and you're super burnt out on it and you're just starting to hate doing it. And or maybe you're someone who, so it has worked for you, but you're sick of it. Or maybe you're another person where it's like you're sick of it and it hasn't worked for you either. And or maybe it just hasn't worked for you. What I want to go over is how you can get more out of tracking and eventually get away from having to track if you want to. But again, we need to make sure we build these skills on top of it to so then we can get away from doing it if we want to, and or we can get more out of it. So I think when people hear nutrition coaching, they often think they just need the right calorie or macro target to see results. It's usually when it comes down to they're not seeing results, or they're not losing body fat they want the way they want, or they're not seeing results. It's usually just, or if they're maybe a little bit extra hungry, it's because, again, it's their calories, right? Their calories need to be adjusted. They need to eat less. They need to eat more. They need to decrease their calories to see more weight loss. They need to increase their calories to build more muscle. They're hungry, so they need to increase their calories, or you're having these issues because you're not eating enough. And again, that is important, and tracking calories and macros is important. And I'll talk about why specifically and for what reasons. But the big thing being is they're just a set of numbers. And I often see people to put too much stock into them and thinking it's this magic thing that is going to get you to lose body fat and everything like that. But if we're not also developing these skills, you're just not going to get as much out of it, right? Or they treat tracking like a magic fix. It's, oh, it was a bad week, I didn't track. So I didn't track my food. Therefore, it was a bad week automatically, when it's okay. There are still a million different things that you could do, even though you didn't track. But if you use it as, well, hey, I'm not tracking, so therefore I'm not on plan, again, that can become problematic there. Or it was a good week because I tracked. So it was like, yeah, I tracked my food. It was a good week. Well, that also doesn't mean just because you tracked that it was a good week, because you could have, one, not hit the right amount of food that you need it for what your current goal is. Or maybe it wasn't like you hit your calories and macros, but maybe it wasn't necessarily the greatest food choices. And those are going to have impacts on you in the short term and potentially even long term. People just put a lot of stock into, I tracked, it was a good week. I didn't track, it was a bad week. And I just feel like that leads to this kind of thought process of, tracking's good, so even it doesn't matter what you do as long as you track. And then if you don't track, it's bad. And that leads people to now not make great choices because they're not tracking, because they feel like they can't stay on track at that point. Tracking your calories and macros isn't automatically going to lead to results. It's just one piece of the bigger picture. And it is a great education and awareness tool. I think it can be super helpful from that standpoint if we do these things right. But when we put too much stock into it and think it's the magic piece and like your numbers are just off a little bit and that's what's going on, that's where we're going to get ourselves into trouble. But then also, like, people asking about specific calorie amounts for fat loss dieting, or what they need for themselves specifically. These are good questions to ask, and I understand why, because I've been there myself. But the more I learn about tracking, it's just one of those things where if you're not actually adhering to what you're doing, and then whether that be on purpose or on accident, it's like the calorie amounts are just, they're just they just almost don't even matter, in my opinion. And so that's why I think it's just imperative that we build these three things in combination. Like I said, though, most people are going to treat it like something they have to do, right? So, oh, hey, if I want to get in better shape, I have to track my calories and macros. Or again, they assume by tracking that they're automatically going to improve their body comp and or health, when in reality, if that's the only thing they're doing is just putting in numbers and logging food on as they go, you're just randomly entering numbers and it doesn't really mean anything. And so if you want to get more out of tracking and then eventually not need it, or feel like you need it 24/7, 365, or maybe you don't ever even need to track your calories and macros, you have to build the skills that make it actually work. And with my clients, I focus on developing three key areas on top of calories and macros, because for most people, we are going to start with that. Not in every situation. It just depends on the person, their history, where they're at from a mental perspective, what their goals are. most people, I want to have some form of tracking. Maybe it's not a super specific calorie goal. Maybe it's a range of calories. Maybe it's, hey, I just want to see the food you're eating. But getting some form of tracking going is super helpful. And I would like to get people there in some form or fashion. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we don't do any tracking off the bat there. But in most situations, I want to see some sort of food log or again, a like couple weeks there. But saying that, I develop on focusing three key areas. That one, make tracking more effective. So it's okay, you're putting in the time to do this. Let's make sure we're getting the most out of it because that would suck if you're spending all this time and all that mental bandwidth tracking your calories and macros and you're not really getting the most out of it. Again, that's a poor return on investment. I can see where eventually that leads to people not wanting to do it. And it's why am I doing this? And then two, maybe again, something that they might not ever even need to do. So maybe we can develop these skills here that I'm about to go over and you won't ever even need to do it. You could get away with not having to track every last calorie and macro. Or eventually, if it's something that you don't feel like you have to do ever again if you desire, or you can do it during certain periods of time if you want to, right? Hey, during my fat loss phase, I am going to track. But you know what? Outside of that, I'm going to rely on these skills that I've built and I don't need to track every last calorie and macro for certain periods of time. But again, it could be to the point to where if you tracking calories and macros, you could get to the point to where you don't ever have to do it again if we develop these skills. All right, so let's go over to three different tiers here of this. So number one's going to be your eating habits plus skills. So foundational habits like slowing down when eating. Yeah, so the eating habits and skill thing is going to be, okay, what are the foundational habits that we need to have anyways, right? So it's like, hey, whether you can't track, so if you can't track for whatever reason and you focus on these eating habits, it's going to already set you up to be in a better position to eat in the right amount that you need to. But then also the skill as well too, right? Knowing what to eat, things like that. So we obviously want to develop that over time. So this is the foundational habits like slowing down when eating, really slowing down, not eating on the rush, not eating on the go, setting time aside to eat sitting down versus just eating while you're working or something like that. Really chewing your food. That right there, just working on that foundational habit, it's going to get you so much more out of tracking calories and macros than if you just put numbers into an app and have no regard for what are the things we're doing around our meals. And as I said, it will also help you regulate without tracking. Improving food quality. Right off the bat, one of the reasons I want to get a food log from someone is I just want to see, okay, where can we improve their food quality? Is that a limiting factor for them? What does that look like? Because people will ask, what's the right amount of carbs I need to have? What's the right amount of calories and macros? But again, if the food quality is not there and we're just eating processed junk all the time, you're going to struggle. So it's like we need to work on improving food quality. And by doing that, we tend to regulate our appetite much better. And this doesn't mean that you need to necessarily, this doesn't mean you necessarily need to eat quote unquote clean 100% of the time. We want to have a good base of whole foods because if not, no matter what our calories and macros are, we're going to struggle. It's going to be much tougher. And probably from a long-term health perspective, that's not necessarily great. And you are going to feel like you need to always track if that's the case. And again, this goes hand in hand, but a good base of food volume, making sure that we're increasing our food volume and getting a good base. We don't need to necessarily food volume our way 100%, but we want to probably increase our food volume. And then building more like balanced meals, for example, right? So having a meal that consists of a protein, a carb, fat, and veggies instead of just having some candy for a meal, right? It's again, maybe you can fit that into your macros. If we start to build full balanced meals more often than not, you're going to set yourself up to manage hunger much better. You're going to feel yourself better and you're likely going to be able to regulate your appetite throughout the day. Whereas, again, if you don't do that and you just log meals and that ends up fitting your macros at the end of the day, again, you're going to feel like you need to track all the time if that's the case. So again, consistent meals instead of random eating. So having a set structure of, hey, here's how many meals I'm going to eat per day, or maybe it's either 3 or 4, or on these types of days, it's 3 meals. On this day, it's 4. And then again, giving yourself a little bit of flexibility there, but we have some sort of structure from day to day that you're going to have most of the time versus not having any structure with your nutrition whatsoever. Again, if you're tracking your calories and macros and you don't have any structure in terms of what your meals look like, day to day or how you set them up in terms of timing, how many, you're going to struggle with tracking calories and macros, especially if you're someone who just inputs it in at the end of the day. I think another eating habit skill that is imperative is realizing no food is off limits and avoiding the all or nothing mindset. It's a foundational skill to where we can have certain foods, but it's all about how we moderate it. And if we do these other foundational habits and get away from that all or nothing, because I just find that all or nothing tends to lead to on for a little bit, off for a while. I need to get back on. I'm on for a week. Now I had a bad food. I'm completely off. So again, you could track your calories and macros, but if we don't build that skill and develop that skill and work on that skill, you're going to struggle long term. Improving your meal timings is another one, right? So making sure that we're eating meals around what works best for us, how our body responds, but then also in line with human physiology of, okay, we probably don't want to save all of our calories for right before bed. We want to probably eat a little bit more around our workouts versus further away from our workouts. So some small meal timing stuff like that can be super helpful and it can set you up to, again, get more out of your tracking calories and macros. And so when you start to develop these skills, like I said, you'll get more out of your calorie and macro tracking. Again, we need to build that education. We need to build that skill. We need to build those foundational habits in combination with tracking calories and macros. And a lot of times when you do those things, there's less of a need to track calories and macros because your body is actually really good at regulating food when we improve our habits. But either way, if you are tracking your calories and macros, you're going to get way more out of them now by developing that. And so again, that's a big part of what I do is developing those foundational skills with people there in combination with tracking potentially if that's something they want to do. But again, if we just give somebody numbers and they're not doing those things, they're going to have a much tougher time sticking to what they're doing. Number two is going to be huge. It's going to be body awareness. So learning how to understand how you respond to stress. So how do you respond when you're under stress? For me here, this is checking in with clients of, hey, how was your week? What was your stress like? And then going from there, if you said your hunger's higher, like you're stressed, and then getting that data over multiple weeks and seeing a pattern of, hey, when you get stressed, you tend to go off plan more, right? And so again, understanding how you body responds to stress, how you specifically respond to stress and understanding what's going on is super important. How do you respond to poor sleep? How do you respond to a higher training load than normal, right? You're moving, exercising a lot more. A lot of people think that hunger is a bad thing, but then if you're exercising a lot, your body's going to need those nutrients. So if we can understand what's going on there, okay, I'm just at a higher need of calories you're under versus again you're just like, oh, I'm trying to move more, I'm tracking my calories, I need to eat 1,500 calories, but I'm super freaking hungry. It's okay, we need, if you understand what's going on, now you're more likely to make an adjustment, potentially understand what's going on and be like, well, I'm in a fat loss phase, so I am going to be hungrier, so I need to work through this. Whereas if you don't understand that and you're not aware of that and you don't have the requisite skills, again, just tracking a number is going to be very challenging for you. How does a lack of structure impact your ability to stay on track and make food choices? What's it like during the week versus the weekend? Hey, when you have way more a structure during the week, you tend to be on plan, but then on the weekend you completely fall off because you don't have as much structure. So now we know that's a limiting factor and we can start to work on that. How do certain foods impact you? When I have these foods, I tend to be a bit hungrier, or hey, these are very satiating for me. How does your meal timing choices impact you? If you eat less during the day, are you now hungrier at night? And then now you're more likely to overconsume calories later on. Whereas if you just put numbers in, you're not learning these things. You don't really know what is going on. So you need to understand how your body responds to things and what is going on from a physiological standpoint, and just even how your brain perceives things when we're maybe under recovered, high stress, poor sleep, whatever that may be. And then also, like, how do certain meals impact you later in the day? A lot of times it's okay, cool, that's a good meal, but how do you feel after you eat it? Do you feel good after you eat it? Do you feel fine? Do you get hungry within an hour? Because if you have a good meal on paper and it hits your calories, but then 30 minutes later you're ravenously hungry, it's like, all right, you're going to struggle. So we need to look at, okay, what do we need to do in that meal? Do we need to slow down our eating? Do we need to improve our food quality? And that's where, again, the skill side of things comes in, but we need to be aware of these things. For example, how can the menstrual cycle impact your food choices and needs? Maybe different for my women out there during different periods of time in the menstrual cycle. You may find that you are a bit hungrier. You may find that your willpower is a little bit lower. You're a little bit more stressed. And how does that all impact you? And we need to be aware of these things, because if we're not, again, we're going to struggle there. So developing awareness of how your body. One other thing too that I want to go over before I finish this is, hey, are we in a fat loss phase or are we in a building phase? Because that's going to be another thing where it's like, hey, when I'm in a fat loss phase, probably need to be a little bit hungrier and I need to expect some hunger. And if that's super uncomfortable for me and anytime I'm hungry, I eat food, you're going to struggle and not see the results that you want to see. Again, that's just tracking your calories and macros is not going to give you that information. So developing awareness of how your body responds to your input. So the things that we're doing, how is your body responding to that? Because a lot of people think that they just happen to them, when really a lot of the things with our body is from things that you're doing to it. And we just need to understand how that is impacting us and what are the downstream effects of that. And also the current state that it's in. And so what I mean by that is, are you sleep deprived right now? Are you going through a stressful period of time? Are you in a fat loss phase where things are going to be a little bit different than what they typically are in terms of your kind of the current state? You're going to be hungrier. Your brain's going to be like, hey, we need some more energy. And that's going to influence your decision making and what you do and how food tastes and everything like that. To me, this is an integral part of my coaching and what I do with clients is developing this more body awareness of what is your body telling you? Because I think too many people just ignore that. And then things just happen to them. When we can get out, we can have that 360 view and we can overlook things. We can start to make better choices and understand that things aren't just happening to us. It is based on things that we are doing and we have control over that to an extent, right? But we have control, but then also understand that At the same time, the things that we are doing, that's going to be, your brain's going to perceive that in a way, and you're just in a different physiological state, and you're just in a different mental state, and that's going to impact your decision making and what you do and what you feel. But again, if we don't have that awareness, we're just going to go based off of how we feel. That's usually not going to be productive towards body composition and health long term, because your body wants what's most comfortable. It wants to have as much energy storage available as possible for survival. So it doesn't care about your body composition and what you look like. It's all about survival. And now we have this, obviously, this mismatch between our environment and what we evolved with, and how our brain evolved and how our body evolved. And this is where we've run into this issue of the many people being obese and being overweight. All right, so self-regulation is number 3, right? So at this point, it's okay, you have the education, you're aware of how your body and brain responds to your environment, how it responds to certain food choices, phases of your nutrition, how it responds when you're hungry, or what makes you hungry. But what choices do you actually make? And that is super important, right? Because you could have all the knowledge, you could have all the knowledge around your body, you could have the awareness. If we're not making the choices that we need to make and they're not aligned with what your current goal is, you're going to struggle. So we need to make sure that we have the actual follow through of everything, right? So this is applying what you know in real life, and that you also have to make the choices. And it's probably not a calorie or macro problem. It's probably something from an education standpoint or a lack of body awareness, right? Because if we're not making the choices that we need to make, what needs to be worked on to get us to that point? Because again, it's like, all right, you get hungry during the fat loss phase, but you constantly give into that. We need to look at, okay, how can we set this up to where you actually are going to be able to stick to it? And again, it's probably not a, oh, hey, you just need to track better. You need to track more food. You need to decrease your calories. Your calories need to be more precise. Again, that's probably not the thing there. It comes down to the environment and how are we setting ourselves up for that. And you say you want to do something, but then your choices don't align with that. Like we need to get that in check. And that's a bigger issue than, hey, I didn't track this week, that's why I'm not seeing the results I want to see. Or, hey, I did track this week, how come I didn't see the results I wanted to see there? So while calories and macros are important, it's just as important to build these skills, because they, one, again, get you more out of tracking calories and macros. And because of that, you're more likely to see results. Because if you're going to get more out of tracking calories and macros, like, you're going to be able to be more precise. You're going to be able to make the right food choices. It's going to set your body up to be in the best state to do whatever you want to do to it. And so when we can get more out of it, we're more likely to see results. And then the big thing being, it's going to eventually allow you to not have to track 24/7, 365 if you desire. And I don't know about you, but I haven't tracked for a while, and it's because I don't want to track every last calorie and macro. That does not sound fun to me anymore, and I don't want to do it. But I feel like I've also developed the education and the skill around nutrition. I did my time tracking calories and macros. I have good body awareness. Like, I understand what's going on. I know how to go back to the skill thing. I know how to set my body up to regulate food intake much better. And I know what's going on. I know that when I'm more stressed, I'm going to be more likely to consume more calories. I'm probably going to have this preference towards highly processed, high carbohydrate, high fat type foods. I'm going to want to have more comfort type food when I'm stressed. When I don't get good sleep, it's the same thing, right? Or sometimes for me, when I get stressed, it's I don't want to eat, and I have to make sure that I get in enough nutrition, because otherwise what happens then is, then one, it's not going to be good for body composition, but then two, even if we in the short term, like, we get stressed and we restrict food intake, you still are going to be in that debt of calories and micronutrients, and you do have to pay that debt, right? And typically it comes back to, now you're going to be hungry for more highly processed, carbohydrate rich type foods, high fat, high carbohydrate type foods. And then from a self-regulation standpoint, like, I know what I need to do to make sure that I stay on track. Now, again, am I 100% with that all the time? No, but I have those two, the skill, the education, and the awareness, and then I know how to set it up to where now it makes it easier for me to self-regulate at that point, right? But you still need that, because again, if you have all those things, but you still aren't self-regulating based on what you want to do, you are going to struggle. So again, this is exactly what I want to do with clients. I want to build this skill. Like, yes, I think if you want to track your calories and macros, we'll definitely do it, but we also need to make sure we develop these skills on top of it, because it's imperative to do that with it. Because like I said, you can get away with not tracking if you need to for a day or two. If whatever happens, you can get more out of what you're actually doing currently with tracking, and we can get you away from not having to track calories and macros. And I just find that super, people feel like once they start tracking, they have to always do it forever. If we build the skills, we don't have to do that on there. So I hope this was helpful. And again, this is basically a big part of what I do inside coaching around nutrition coaching. So if you have any more questions on it, just reach out to me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEH_. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have any questions on this topic, you can just reach out to me there and we can chat about it. And then lastly, if you found this podcast be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and a review, and that will help more people find it. That's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.